Trump. Trump as the Patsy fall guy to take us into the reset. I've been thinking, and I've got a potential hypothesis that it has some benefit or some facts to support it. I've been seeing the economists, their kind of tweets, a lot of derision of Trump, a lot of non-acceptance as him as president, how he is insensitive to how finely balanced the economic system is, comments like that, which kind of set up the perfect precursor smoking gun for any economic failure to being his fault. So we know we have an economic reset that needs to come. At the moment, we have a bond situation that's getting quite precarious. That is the bond market, which is a lot bigger than the stock market. Too much debt, too much of it being recreated. Someone has to take this down in a smash and burn. We have an equity market in the US that is at year 2000, yes, dot-com boom type valuations across all measures. PE, PEGs, earnings, oh, you name it. I don't even want to go through all of it. So you've got an overvalued stock market, and you've got a precarious bond market and huge debt situation. You've got the fact that the US can't afford to be the strongest currency in the world, but China needs to devalue. Japan is devaluing. You've got the Eurozone that's, in my view, going to unwind and unravel. You've got the uncertainty of Brexit leaning on the pound on all the major currencies. And you've got a not as strong as they would like you believe US economy, where you can't afford to have the dollar get too strong. Otherwise, it's going to starve all exports, and it's going to remove a large amount of any manufacturing that they have advantage. So you need a fall guy. And who was the fall guy? Who carried the can? You know, the last president known to be top notch on the economy was Bill Clinton. Actually, he wasn't economically great at all. He just happened to be the president in charge when the biggest demographic, the boomers, hit 47, the age and year when you were most economically active and pay the highest tax typically. And there we had the man who, as a Democrat, whose big state and expenditure over typical Republican policies, which is slightly erred towards smaller government officially, not that Bush did that, Bush W, and lower taxation, actually returned a surplus at one point. And the only reason he got a small surplus was because he was riding the horse at its strongest moment. And who did they give to set up Obama for a double term? They gave the overextended stock market, the emerging Al-Qaeda, no matter what you choose to believe, because Clinton actually failed to act on a Somali boat incident, and all those bombs to blow up on the Bush's watch. Now, I'm no fan of Bush. I don't think he deserved better. But the point being how you determine as an American president has got little to do with what you do, really, unless you do something very destructive. It's about timing. It's about timing and at what point in the economic cycle and the asset cycles you come into power. We've just had Obama hand over the stock market at the same levels that Clinton handed over to Bush. We've got an even more indebted society, even more pressure. Remember, when Bush took over, the interest rates weren't at the levels they are today. We don't have monetary policy weapons anymore at all of any significance. So the world's and the US markets and the Western markets that have aped the US to a large degree have never been in more run out of gas, run out of road, run out of runway. We haven't taken off and we're at the end of the runway and we're going at 300 kilometers an hour. We need 350 to get takeoff. We ain't going to make it. The runway's done. We're about to start plowing into the mud, and then it's a nosedive into the field adjacent and a big explosion. But hold on, we need globalization, and the liberals are the leaders here. The supposed liberals, the Democrats, the United Nations, the IMFs, they all prefer democratic, supposedly left-leaning governments. The free flow, you know, we're inclusive. Whenever you hear the word inclusive, know you're being done, because it's kind of like saying motherhood. No one's against motherhood or being inclusive. It's kind of like apartheid on the one side and inclusiveness on the other. You know, one's good and one's terrible. But inclusive means the breakdown of barriers. It means criminals from bomb nations get to creep through the border without immigration controls into Germany, while the nation that is doing the bombing is inadvertently looking to create that immigrant wave, and the politician that happens to be in charge of the receiving country takes this left-leaning inclusive approach, to the detriment of our own citizens, to the detriment of people living and existing at a higher plane where there is a greater sense of order, to nations that aren't. The global structure wishes to muddy the water and bring everybody down to a certain level. And that's their game, and that's the globalized game. And then the UN, the WTO, all these organizations come back into favor. At the moment, 3 steps forward, and the game is 1 step back with Trump. You want your national interests again. You want your little backlash. We're going to give it to you. But guess what? Everything's going to blow up on it. And next time, you're going to have another 8 years of left-leaning globalization, world government, harmonization of tax, control, tech, privacy invasion, the whole shooting match. It's all coming back. All we need is a Patsy to fly this plane into the hill, and you guys ain't going to get a voice again. We're going to say, you had your go, and look what you did to everybody. Look what you did. The stock market crashed, the bond market reset, we had to redo debt and everything. Meanwhile, all these things have been building for an entire 49-year cycle, and accelerated from the early 80s, with the bottom of the bond market all the way through. When do you have a bond market cycle? So long, 35 years, just non-stop bull market, more valuable all the time. And now there's more debt, and it's being created faster than you've ever had before, yet we have to create a bull market that keeps increasing the value of this debt that has been exponentially created. Who's the demand? Well, the Fed has to be one of the biggest buyers. China's divesting. So this Ponzi scheme is going to have to reset. We know that. What better to absolutely kill an aspiration of conservative thinking that might say, hey, we want control over our borders. We want this. By the way, I don't mean to sound like I'm pro-Trump. I don't necessarily agree with a wall being built, or don't agree. I don't have a view. He is just controlled as much as Clinton and any of the others are. He's hired loads of Goldman Sachs people. I know a lot of you are getting high on the mood music that he's giving off and giving out. He is on Kissinger's knee just as much as Clinton is. He'll be the guy to kill your aspirations. The worst thing that can happen is you feel you're being represented, be given a sheep in wolf's clothing leader who then goes and destroys your cause, or has every reset that needs doing done on his shift, so that never again do your views get expressed, as others turn to you and say, look how your line of thinking served us. We had a small version of that here in the UK with Philip Green and BHS. He sucked it for dividends, he milked it, he took every little juicy drop out of this corpse until it was literally rabid dry. This is called a control fraud being done on the corporate level. And he handed the controls to some guy who'd been bankrupt a few times, had tried to phoenix and failed many companies many times. He sold it for £1 to this man with all the pension liabilities that he'd hollowed out the money from, and left this guy to actually run it into the ground, which it promptly did within 18 months. I think it could have even been within a year. I don't have an exact timing for you, so don't quote me. But he was just the fall guy for it, and he was 1 step removed for Phil Green. Phil Green didn't break the company. Hey, I wasn't even managing it. I'd sold it. It's somebody else's business. Why are you chasing me? Oh, come on. What do you mean? What do you mean? Unfortunately for poor Phil, he didn't leave much time in between it. He left it a little bit late for passing the hot potato, and people saw through that ruse to a large degree. But he would have been in even deeper trouble if he was owning and sharing a failed enterprise, and that he certainly wasn't. He'd passed the burning baton to the next man, after making sure there's only one real outcome and sucking it dry. And that's called a control fraud. You set the incentives, you take a live and thriving business, you leverage it, you maximize it, you suck all the profits out, you don't reinvest, and then you leave a shell for the next man. And nationally, that's where America is. right there. But Clinton got to be Bill, the man who oversaw the great boom and said the economy's stupid, while doing very little for it apart from being lucky in terms of time. Obama got to ride the bull market of the crash of the bull years, the 2009 lows to 2017, an 8-year cycle, 2 re-election campaigns. This man was great. No, he wasn't. He didn't understand economics at all. He just happened to be the guy who got handed the baton. Now we sit with all these overvaluations in both the bond market, trepidation in the bond market, the complete facade of reflation in America, to the point that valuations in equities, there's no places to hide all this excess liquidity, have gone way before. Netflix hemorrhaging cash like never tomorrow, hyper valued, but can't make a return. All their shareholders are just having to pay in all the time just to keep the business running, so that clients that are paying low, it's a movie channel for your laptop and your TV. This isn't changing the world. This isn't new Amazon or Google that's going to be in everything you do. What's going on here? Well, the reset will come. And what better to give it? To give it to a man who defines himself solely as a representative of the pushback era, the one step back, the pushback against globalization. How better do you destroy these forces then make them the banner of all kingdom come failure? How better, I ask you? And the left, those of you that talk about the left being in turmoil and denial, they are being set up for a return of great momentum that will see the global national structures make all new 3 steps forward in the ashes of what this man who's been hired to fly the plane into the mountain will leave in terms of corpuses. That is my hypothesis. I've been thinking about it. It won't necessarily be right. It's a thought. It's your education channel. It's your amusement channel. Hell, it's whatever you want it to be. But beware. He's already being fingered for failure. He's already being said he doesn't understand. You people voted him. You don't know. The time for undermining and laughing at democracy, for the idiot votes, being given a vote, you will be punished for how you voted incorrectly on Brexit and by putting Trump in, and you will be made a pillar of idiocy by the outcomes that will follow, which will include probably a pound collapse and maybe a euro collapse. Who knows what they'll plan on the Brexit side, but particularly on the US side. Someone to carry the can. Your real leader of pushback against the New World Order and the global control structure will become the pantomime villain of all failure, so that your voice can be righteously ignored for a generation. Think about it. Speak to you soon. Happy days.